Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is Göksel. I'm the secretary for the Blue Tulip Human Rights Center. Blue Tulip Human Rights Center is established in 2017 in Norfolk, Virginia, and it's made of volunteers. The purpose for Blue Tulip Human Rights Center is being the support and voice for the isolated and silenced women and children. So today we're going to host a very important event. Actually, this is our second event. This is our third event, I'm sorry, in CSV NGO 65. And today is going to be the third event. The first event was on psychological support on forced immigrants. And the second event was yesterday on empowering women into technology workforce. And this is the topic of our third event and final event in CSV NGO 65 is going to be the human rights awareness on youth and its impact. So as Blue Tulip Human Rights Center, we plan to make a campaign on this in 2021. And we have already started building a human rights mini track, the training mini track. We believe it's very important for increasing the human rights awareness. You can reach that mini track through www.blue-tulip.org. So today we have three wonderful speakers, and it's an honor for us to listen to their experiences and their thoughts about this topic. First, I'd like to very briefly introduce our speakers. Sarah Elizabeth Dill. She's focused on international law, foreign affairs, and human rights. And she has been also a board member for Blue Tulip Human Rights. And Susan. Susan is an editor and writer for the Muse Writer Centers in the Hampton Roads area. And she has been volunteering as a copy editor and social media coordinator for the Blue Tulip Human Rights Center for more than 2 years now. Jada is the founder of WeLead, and her interest areas are social, entrepreneurship, and STEM areas for women and girls. And also she has been the United States representative for Young Leaders Over the Horizon organization. So I would like to first give the floor to Sarah and get her insights and experiences on, and her critiques on the international context and global impact when it comes to human rights awareness amongst youth.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here today, and welcome to all of our participants and to my fellow panelists. Far too often, historical events lose their significance as generations become further removed from those who lived through wars or other atrocities. Memories fade, and despite advances in technology, we fail to preserve and promote the voices of the past. As connected as we've become to our phones, laptops, iPads, and social media networks, the world has become more disconnected from realities, histories, and experiences outside of our own. An overabundance of information and platforms that allow anyone with a keyboard to become a self-proclaimed journalist overnight have resulted in diminished quality and accuracy in the information we consume, but especially in the human rights context. In many countries, education is one of the lowest priorities when it comes to government spending or private investment. In the primary and secondary education levels, students are taught and spoon-fed to pass standardized tests, rather than how to critically think, explore, and experience the realities of knowledge. Young girls are especially challenged, often tasked with caring for the family, or unable to attend school once a month due to the lack of proper and private toilet facilities. Or they are subjected to unlawful bans on hijabs in schools or government offices, restricting their access to education or employment unless they abandon their religious beliefs. Echo chambers and cancel culture, along with widespread harassment and online bullying that attempt to silence voices, result in diminished critical thinking and constructive debate. Regimes restrict free speech or press, punishing dissenting voices or preventing citizens from accessing information, hampering efforts at understanding and peace. Most recently, the civil in civil discourse has mostly disappeared, as the opinion divide grows into absolutes rather than attempts to build a bridge upon common ground to seek peaceful coexistence. Technology and artificial intelligence, despite best intentions, often reinforce and fortify echo chambers and narrow our vision on topics, limiting the diversity of viewpoints we consider. But all is not lost. In the younger generations, we see students and young professionals brave enough to speak up, to get involved, to engage in pursuits of awareness, justice, reform, and progress. Growing up in a time when their entire lives are broadcast to the world, they feel a greater freedom to speak out. They also have the benefit of direct windows or live streams into the world and the daily life of others, allowing them to see the good, but also the bad, to seek out ideas and ways to improve things, or to bring the world's attention to fixable problems and demand action to protect human life and the environment. In the human rights world, as every day brings new headlines of atrocities, we often wonder, are human rights abuses becoming more frequent? Are we simply more informed? Will other generations follow in our footsteps to remain dedicated to fighting for these rights? What I do know is this: no matter what the answer to that question is, I definitely see more youth wanting not only to be engaged on human rights and governance, but also to seek careers and dedicate their efforts to making the world a better place. They're fostering a new era of demanding access to government and those making decisions that will impact their futures, mobilizing voices and awareness, demanding accountability from businesses who often have more power and impact on people's lives than the governments in the countries where they operate. As we look at Malala, Greta, and other powerful young voices, we must also recognize the bravery of every young person working for a better world, the incredible young souls who have the ability to see a wrong and are willing to speak up, knowing that if they'd simply been born in another country, they could be the person in that position. Because I always strive to be solutions and strategy focused, rather than simply talking about an issue or complaining about a problem, I'd like to offer and briefly discuss a few things that I see as key to our support of the younger generations in their quest to be aware of, protect, and defend human rights. But I also hope and encourage any youth attending today to ask questions and share with us your ideas as to what we can do to support your generation. The first thing is investment in education. If we are truly going to promote the younger generations and give them the tools they need to be engaged on human rights, we must invest. And not just within our own countries, although that should be the first priority, but we should ensure that every child in the world is provided a quality education and access to the healthcare and medicine they need to allow them to attend school and develop and thrive. Societies must also have the economic support to make this possible, keeping children in school rather than pressuring them to enter the workforce at a young age to support their families. As of February 18th, 2021, nearly 222 million children are out of school worldwide due to the coronavirus pandemic. This is a human rights violation in and of itself. But if we look back to pre-pandemic, the numbers are not much better. Only 68.4% of children in countries affected by fragility and conflict complete primary school. The number drops even lower when you look at secondary education. We also have a learning crisis, with 1 in 6 children and adolescents not reaching minimum proficiency levels in reading or mathematics. Another problem results for children with disabilities, or children of determination, the phrase coined in Dubai that I prefer to use. In low and middle income countries, 40% of children of determination are out of school at the primary level. The percentage rises to 55% for lower secondary education. This is often the result of the inability of schools to have facilities or trained professionals to ensure a quality education experience. Ensuring access to quality education is part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and something that every nation must make a priority, not only to protect that human right, but to ensure that generations are equipped with the knowledge and tools that they need to protect the human rights of others. By investing in this from day one, we can ensure that future generations respect and protect all human rights. This is why programs like Dubai Cares, Plan International, CARE, and others are so vital as they invest in and develop schools and healthcare facilities in low and middle income countries. This allows children to have the same opportunities. Given that we're at the UN Commission on the Status of Women meetings, I want to mention I was very impressed when I learned about Dubai Care's efforts in over 57 countries to simply build private toilet facilities for teenage girls and supply them with products so that these young women did not have to miss school once a month, greater hampering of their education. A simple gender-sensitive solution that can help promote gender equality in education, promote human rights, and advance the next generation of youth leaders. Next, we must create spaces that allow youth to engage with the world and their career paths. We must welcome youth into our offices and into our lives, provide them with the real-world training and advice they need to launch their own careers. But we also need to be mentors, friends, and someone they can turn to. I recently spoke with a law student who's the child of refugees and has decided to make her career one of protecting human rights and working with immigrants. But she expressed her concerns and fears about not coming from a family where her parents are judges or lawyers and not having access to the networks or even answers to basic questions about pursuing a legal career. It was a stark reminder to me that we all need to be open to providing assistance and support and having open doors for the younger generations, ensuring that someone's circumstances do not prevent them from having opportunities and changing the world. Younger generations also need meaningful spaces on boards, in government, and in all places where decisions are being made. And not simply a place at the table, but ensuring that they have the opportunity to make their voices and ideas heard. As I look at countries like Finland, the United Arab Emirates, Scotland, Kenya, and New Zealand, all of these countries have young people elected to prominent positions or appointed to high-level cabinet offices. Currently, the Prime Minister of Finland is a 34-year-old female. The Minister of State for Youth Affairs in the United Arab Emirates was appointed in 2016 when she was only 22 years old, and she remains in that post until today. These examples need to become the norm, not the exception. We must also ensure that the information being provided to younger generations is accurate, to ensure they are fighting for the right things, for practical solutions, and not reaching for the impossible. Recent examples include definitions of genocide, war crimes, or seeking justice for atrocities. If generations are raised demanding things that are impossible to obtain in traditional contexts, or being given unrealistic expectations about what the world can give them, the cycle of trauma and unrest will only continue. We must ensure that they're given realistic expectations and a solid foundation and understanding of human rights norms and the laws that protect them, as well as the resources and mechanisms that are available. Finally, we really need to foster the ability of youth from around the world to truly connect with each other, learn from one another, and engage in multilateral projects. Cultural, religious, and geographical awareness is a vital component to international human rights work. When innovation hubs and centers are created to help youth develop their ideas, when investors and venture capitalists look to the future and consider those just starting their careers, and when government offices are available to the younger generations, we're ensuring that the future will be protected. Finally, we must protect, support, and act as allies for the younger generations. This is their future that is at stake. We must lift up their voices, ensure that they have time to speak, and that we properly consider their ideas. Be mindful that there may be new ways of approaching the problem, but we also must do our very best to protect them as they raise their voices. When we see countries like Turkey, Myanmar, and others suppressing the voices of the younger populations, cracking down on protests, and sending innocent college students to prison merely for speaking out, we must take a stand and fight to protect them. We also need to ensure they have the tools and training to critically think and challenge what they hear on the news or read on the internet, be able to distinguish between accurate facts and analysis and editorialized or biased reports, or at the lowest level, fake news or state-sponsored news channels and propaganda. However, this should not only fall on them, we must take steps now to ensure the accuracy of the information they received, carefully balanced against the needs of free speech. We need to ask the question, what future do we want for the youth? And what tools do we want to give them to ensure that they fight for and protect human rights? Evil and greed will always exist in some form. It always has, and it would be naive to think that we can eliminate all war or end all human rights abuses and atrocity crimes. What we can do is to prevent them as much as possible, to build a society that has concern and respect for others as instinctive and automatic, and to try to mitigate the extent of harm. We must remain steadfast in our commitment to raise awareness and quickly respond when atrocities occur. We have to engage in reconciliation and restorative justice, to encourage true healing and peace from atrocities so that conflicts are resolved permanently. Shield the younger generations from having to revisit and relitigate the conflicts of the past. But this process starts at home, in each of our daily lives, in our actions and words. For if we as individuals do not respect human rights and dignity in the small things we do, how can we expect societies to respect human rights on a broader scale? A hateful or racist comment to friends or in a tweet can easily be magnified to a global campaign of hate or persecution. It sends a message to others that this type of speech is okay. The bullying of one person can spiral into a piling on of harassment, silencing important voices and preventing reconciliation or resolution. When bullies as children gain control of a nation, they may find it easier to harass or persecute the population or place limits on speech they disagree with. The exile or exclusion of a child on the playground for perceived differences, left unchecked, can allow for adults to think that it is okay to exclude groups of people from access to basic necessities in society, or to treat them as a subclass of human beings, subjecting them to slavery or inhumane treatment. Sexual harassment of women deemed to be a joke or locker room talk. When it's excused by society or blamed on the woman, it desensitizes us to when it becomes domestic violence, rape, or widespread discrimination and persecution of women. As I said in my TED Talk, if we do not punish rape and sexual assault in everyday life, sending a message to men that this behavior will not be tolerated, we will and do have widespread rape during times of armed conflict or civil unrest. We must work to create a kinder, more tolerant, understanding, diverse, and safe society. If we want our future leaders and CEOs to protect and promote human rights, we must ensure that these values are deeply ingrained during their youth. Bullying, corruption, lawlessness, discrimination, and violence cannot be tolerated in even the smallest amount. But so too, we must set the example and foster an environment of caring for the other person, of being willing to stand up for others, speaking out against injustice, and giving so that all may have the basics in life and the opportunity for a bright future. I'm so hopeful as I see the efforts of the younger generations. Every week, I have the incredible opportunity to speak with young, aspiring lawyers and human rights advocates who are seeking mentoring and advice. I'm thrilled at their enthusiasm and dedication. I also hope that they will learn from the mistakes and missteps of past and present generations to create a world where all have access to vaccines, where children do not grow up hungry or without access to clean water, or experiencing the horrors of war being displaced from their homes. A world where we do not have to hear that 1 out of 3 women experiences violence or sexual assault. I sense the next generations will have the strong voices and motivations to make this a reality, and I hope that we all can pledge to support them and ensure that they have the resources they need to continue building a world that protects human rights for all. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing the remarks and recommendations of the next speakers and to any questions towards the end of the program.
Thank you, Sarah. So you really provided very impressive examples and strong messages and very clear and solid actions that needs to be taken. And so I'll leave the floor to Susan, and I have just some notes from your speech that you emphasize that the youth, the next generation, should engage with the world and they should communicate with each other. But on the other hand, so social media is one of these tools to handle this. On the other hand, social media comes with some propaganda tools, inaccurate information, or perception manipulation, and reality stretching. So from this perspective, I like to listen to Susan's opinions on the power and impact of social media for young youth activism and increasing human rights awareness on youth. So the floor is yours, Susan.
Thank you, and thank you, Sarah, for those wonderful remarks. I just want to say, first of all, I'm really honored to be here with such amazing fellow panelists. I'm by no means an expert on this thing. I'm speaking purely from my personal experience. And I also want to start off and say that experience is formed from my identity as a white American woman. And there are a lot of things that come with that that put me in a place of great privilege. Um, so, some background about how I became involved with Blue Tulip, first of all. I actually had the honor of knowing some of the Turkish members of Blue Tulip long before Blue Tulip existed, mostly through my mother. If anyone watched the panel last Wednesday that Sarah was also on, my mother was on that, Melissa. And so I actually was kind of witness from the side to Blue Tulip's early formation in 2017, but I didn't become actively involved with Blue Tulip until the summer of 2018. And that's when I started helping out and running the social media accounts. This was right before my third year of university. I got my bachelor's degree from Middlebury College. Middlebury is a small liberal arts school up in Vermont. It has a very strong international focus and, in general, a very engaged student body. There's a really long history of student activism in the US in general, going back to, if you think of the protest against the Vietnam War in the 60s and 70s. And so I think for me, coming to Middlebury, coming to a college like this, that increased my personal awareness of human rights issues across the world, anyways. And then my work with Blue Tulip only enhanced that. And I will say, even prior to that, I grew up here in Norfolk, Virginia. Norfolk has a very large military base. It's the home of the North American NATO headquarters. I went to a school that had the International Baccalaureate program. We had Model United Nations. We had Model NATO. We had all of these ways for young people, for high school students to engage with the broader global community. And those are a lot of experiences that I had that came mostly from these formal sites of education, right? And so that's how I kind of had this increased awareness, but not everybody has access to that. Whereas platforms like social media are more broadly accessible. They're not universal. There are a lot of exceptions to that. But in general, it's a lot more accessible than going to a small liberal arts college in Vermont. And so I think that is a huge part of how social media can be so effective, and how also, as Sarah mentioned, you can get into these echo chambers, you can get into this very rapid fire back and forth that lacks a lot of nuance. But I will say, I think a lot of young people are active on social media, and I think in general there's a tendency, especially from older generations, to underestimate young people's ability to care and to empathize and to want to get involved, particularly teenagers. I know in American media, there are a lot of kind of portrayals and stereotypes of this bratty, self absorbed teenager. And that's obviously changing. That perception is changing. But I think there's always been just this amazing capacity for teens and young people to want to be involved because they're just becoming aware of the world around them in a lot of cases and looking at these broader aspects of the world. And there's always that strong drive of what's right and what's wrong. And social media kind of allows for a even deeper and, well, not quite deeper, but a broadening of those horizons, right? It allows for the dissemination of information that's not just from traditional news sites. And as Sarah pointed out, there are a lot of downsides to that for sure. But it also means that people can share their personal narratives, and those are read by people. And that's deeply, deeply humanizing in a lot of ways. It's easy to look at a really large number. You can look at, people's experiences as a statistic, right? You look at these statistics of people who are having their human rights violated, maybe in war, maybe through jailing, all of these sorts of things through these regimes, through these crackdowns. And it's easy to say, wow, that's a big number. But if you're reading someone's story, maybe someone posts on Twitter, hey, this is what I went through. It was horrible. I think that's sometimes easier to engage with. I think that there is, especially lately, this oversaturation, right, of all these horrible things happening. And I think that social media can contribute to that, but it can also help bring in more voices into the conversation in a way that makes it a little more accessible. Um, Social media, too, is a tool not just for increasing awareness and for education, one way or another. It can also be a way to organize and a way to increase accountability for people. Sometimes that does go too far. But I think this idea of organizing is really interesting, right? Like if you take the Black Lives Matter music movement of this past summer in particular, Black Lives Matter started as Alicia Garza. And what she said about this was she wanted to create a tool. She and Patrice Coulers and Opal Tometi wanted to create a tool that connects people online and gets people to do stuff offline. And I think that's really important because social media on its own isn't always effective. It can be, but it has to, I think, also have an outlet outside of the internet, right? It has to lead to concrete action. And if you think for nearly 9 minutes. And I think that that's deeply disturbing, right? And it's deeply traumatic to a lot of people. And having that shared so widely really had negative effects on people. But it did also spark this outrage. There were over 3,000 protests around the world that started because people saw this on social media. They heard each other, they were listening to people's voices, especially to Black people's voices, about their experiences and about what needs to change. And there were also, I know at least on my Instagram feed and on my Twitter feed, there was a lot of not just information about what was going on, but there was, hey, if you are in this certain place and you need help, here's a mutual aid fund. If you're at a protest, these people are over here on the corner of this street handing out water bottles, please take one. You know, all these sorts of things where even though social media opens up to a really broad global community, it can also be a source of these kind of local and focused moments and groups of aid in a lot of ways. So it can come back and be localized. Right, but also, I mean, Sarah touched on this, as with any tool, social media has its downsides, and it certainly has a lot of them. Right, you've got to use it with caution. There's so much misinformation here, as we've seen in the US time and time again, especially over the past 4 years and beyond. And it's really polarizing. You get these small chunks of information. They, by nature, have to be quick, they have to be sharp, they have to be easily digestible for them to be effective, but that means that you lack a lot of nuance. And so I think, like I said before, about social media needing to come into the real world, I think a way to engage youth is to use social media as a starting point. You can have a tweet that says, hey, this is an issue, this is something that's going on, go to these resources to learn more, right? And so it can be a way of inviting people in. And I think that's really important. And I think that's part of what Blue Tulip does. That's really important because people can't make change and they can't try to hold powers accountable if they don't know what's going on, right? And Blue Tulip's mission is to be a voice for the voiceless and especially to protect and advocate on behalf of the women and children being wrongfully imprisoned in Turkey. And that's something that I, as a white American woman, wouldn't necessarily have been aware of otherwise if I weren't involved in Blue Tulip. But if I were someone who didn't know about Blue Tulip and I was scrolling through Twitter and saw their tweets, that would be a way for me as a young person to be brought into that and to be engaged. And I think even when it doesn't lead to something as concrete as the Black Lives Matter protest, just that act of being a voice and of allowing people to be heard is so powerful. And I think that that's where a true impact can lie. So it's this idea of social media as a tool for inviting people in, for educating, for creating a platform for advocacy, for empowering youth who may be experiencing these things themselves to know, hey, this is something that isn't right. This is something that I, as a young person, can act on myself. I can organize in my community. I can be a leader. I have the power to take this over, right? Because I saw maybe through Twitter, maybe through Instagram, that this is something that's wrong. This is something, hey, that's happening to me. I recognize that in this other person's experience that I maybe wouldn't have seen if it because maybe it's someone on the other side of the world I maybe wouldn't have known about if it weren't for social media, if it weren't for that kind of global community that's being created. So I think that social media is can be a really effective way to make people's voices heard. And that can be for better or for worse, but I think there is a way to utilize it. And I think Blue Tulip is doing this well, and a lot of other places are doing this well. There's a way to use it to invite people in and to hold people accountable and to create a platform for advocacy. So I think there's a lot of space there to use social media, which can be so detrimental and it can create these echo chambers and it can spread all of this misinformation and be so polarizing. I think there is a way to use it more effectively and to use it to create positive change.
Thank you, Susan. Very impressive points. And also, you mentioned your interaction with your experience on how you had, for example, awareness on the events in the incidents in Turkey through social media, and also how social media should be used as an can be used as a starting point to get engaged, and then it can be used as a source to to be directed to other resources as well. And you also mentioned uh, that there are some tools that can be developed, and technology can be used for bringing people and for a common cause and communicating for that common cause. In that manner, actually, I'd like to give the floor to Jada because I know that technology and especially artificial intelligence is also her area of interest. Hope will be expertise in the future. And she grew up in Turkey and went to a school in Turkey. Now she's studying in the United States. I'd like to listen to her experience on how the communities are changing, how the communities are seeing human rights uh, perspective. And I'd like to also listen to her story on how her personal awareness increased by time. Anything affect that? So the floor is yours, Jada.
Uh, To start off, I am very honored to be here today, especially as a young person. It means so much to me to be able to express my opinions and my experiences here with my fellow panelists. And I was so inspired by what Sarah and Susan talked about so far. And hopefully, I can also widen on that topic as I talk furthermore about my experiences and my community and what I've observed so far. So, as a really quick backstory, I moved to North Carolina roughly 2.5 years ago. Prior to that, I was attending a prestigious high school in Turkey, and I was I was planning on studying college in Germany. So that was kind of my focus back at the time. And to be honest, even though I always considered myself to be someone who tried to be engaged with what was happening in the world and who tried to be aware of, what was happening in different parts of the world, I would say my personal experiences really pushed me to come out of my bubble more and to become more informed regarding the human rights violations happening not only within my country, but around the globe. So basically, in my sophomore year of high school, my family and I had to go through the current government's discriminatory and oppressive policies, which ended up us in having to move to the United States. And this period of time was really it was really a breaking point for me and my me as a person, I would say, because the period before I moved to the United States was filled with me not having my freedom of speech. I was really not able to really express my opinions or share them for that matter on social media or anywhere else, or even interact with people whose opinions I supported, who could have been who maybe were judging the actions of the government, but I couldn't necessarily even interact with such posts because of the political climate within my country. So that was one thing that really made me realize how this made me feel quite trapped in where I grew up to accept as home. And after moving to the United States, building my life from scratch and just like adapting to my new home and my new community made me realize that the feeling of safety and freedom of the feeling of safety and freedom of expression are privileges I've regained after coming to the United States, which is why I realized I would really love to use these liberties to help those who may not currently possess them. So this really led me to do more research and become more aware of what was actually happening in the world and how I, as a person, could maybe help those who I could. So first of all, as Sarah and Susan already touched on, there are so many atrocities going on around the world. Millions of people are being displaced in regions where ethnic cleansing and violent conflicts occur. Several governments are monitoring their citizens' internet use and have or are censoring and imprisoning their citizens for freely expressing their opinions online, which is very similar to what I personally experienced. So it hits home close. And other than that, armed conflict has killed and is killing millions of children in today's world, and protesters of repressive governments have been beaten, arrested by the police, or even killed for voicing their opinions. And one other thing that I realized was that after moving here, I basically realized even though there are many substantial differences between the United States and Turkey, the gender gap in workforce and lack of diversity in STEM are among some of the shared issues, which also is tied to how throughout history, women have often been denied the knowledge, means, and freedom to act in the best interest of themselves and their children. So coming to like being informed was definitely very important for me because I feel like I mentioned, I would consider myself as a student who was trying her best to, be informed through her classes or use social media to find out about what was going on in the world. But going back to what sort of Susan said about not focusing on numbers, but rather on personal stories, personally experiencing something myself and afterwards coming across other personal stories and other people who may be experiencing different incidents was very valuable to me. And also this whole process of being informed, this whole process of trying to become more aware of everything around me also made me realize that not always will my experiences align with someone else's, meaning even if someone's truth does not correlate what I have experienced in the past, it in no way means that I get to deny that it's just a different reality that I need to be aware of and work towards with that person. So all of this information that I sort of was exposed to after getting more into it led me to want to sort of be part of the change that I wanted to see in the world. So I first decided that I wanted to not only adapt to my new community and my new home here and try to support those living around me, but I also wanted to really stay in touch with people in Turkey or the Turkish refugees in Greece. And so I, along with a couple of my other friends here, started giving English as a second language education to refugee children in Greece and Europe. So as in this moment, we do meet with these children 3 times a week, and we have our classes through Zoom. And it's not only about giving language education, but also just overall mental support as well. So basically, since it's not a very like planned English lesson, we try to overall like support them in any area they might need help with. And in addition to that, I also wanted to become more involved in the human rights activities that could be happening in my hometown, like in where I currently live. So I initiated the We Lead nonprofit organization to expose girls in my community to STEM opportunities. And for the same purpose, I also started working with the Code with Classi organization to give girls free coding classes and to make sure they're aware of their potential in areas they might not have discovered prior to these opportunities. And in addition to that, I've realized that with like I believe voter suppression is also a human rights violation, which is why I also try to volunteer during the elections to inform people, and I'm also involved in my school's refugee and outreach club. Now, all of this is sort of connected to the question of how are young people in my community involved in human rights activities. Over time, I've had the opportunity to observe how different young people have different participation in human rights activities going on in their communities. Some of my friends, they are very informed. Again, I do also believe, like Susan mentioned, that social media plays a great role in them being more aware and in them being willing to participate in such activities. But also, I believe every individual who has some sort of awareness and who has some sort of desire to work towards human rights should be actively going out there and sharing their opinions and knowledge with other people. Meaning, my experiences, they are personal to me, but I am not really scared of sharing my vulnerability and my experiences with others so that they can become more aware of what's happening around the world. And I have realized that so many people around me were quite shocked by what I had to say. But as I shared everything with them, they really began to get out of their bubbles as well. And they became more willing to support my work and the work of others along this journey. So I think it's really like it's really a teamwork, and you really need to get out there and just stay in touch with people and try to contact people so that you're not only you're not the only one putting in the effort, because the more people are a part of the movement towards human rights, the more you will the more you will achieve, in my opinion, because it's really, like I said, like it's really important that we're all supporting these activities, because the more people, the more impact. And also the going back to the concept of technology and how it could be used for to support human rights. After, as I mentioned, after moving here, I was always really like passionate about, I would say, emerging technologies. And as I became more involved regarding the human rights incidents around the world, I sort of wanted to observe the interaction of technology and human rights, and how innovative technologies could be used to support human rights. And basically, so I will I'm planning on attending Duke next fall. I'm currently a high school senior, so hopefully I'll be a freshman at Duke next fall. And what I want is to be able to conduct research on how artificial intelligence and machine learning can be employed to detect human rights violations as they occur using social media. So basically, I would like to contribute to the science behind the algorithms that detect dangerous situations using keywords and geolocational data. And basically, this would allow the related authorities to be alerted and thwart the human rights violations early on, which is very important in this era. There are already studies that are being made for this technology that I've talked about, but I think it's actually not, it's pretty objective, it's not my opinion, but basically the research needs a lot more funding, and it needs a lot more people to be involved in it for it to be enhanced and for it to achieve what it aims to achieve. So yeah, this is basically what I have to say. I believe having platforms and environments such as this one, where young people get to share their opinions, their experiences, and what they have to say, is so important, because we really don't get the opportunity as often as we probably would want to. So I'm very grateful that I had the chance to share my perspective on the topic, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jada, for sharing your experiences and your vision on this topic. But there were some questions with the participants, from the participants. First, I'm going to allow Grace. Grace, can you hear us? Grace, your mic is muted. If you have a question for the speakers, please go ahead. And there was one more speaker. Okay. And okay. I think they are not available right now. And so, do speakers have any questions? I'm also checking the chat, by the way.
I have a question to Susan, I guess. I really loved your talk on like how social media can be used for like increasing human rights awareness, especially going back to like how it really supported the Black Lives Movement, and how currently there are a lot of like posts going around for the Asian hate crimes that are happening. So what do you think about this might be like a really specific question, but there are so many people just sharing stuff on their stories. And I believe it's really important to raise awareness by doing so, but also it makes me question how effective it is to only share these rather than actively doing other stuff. You know, how like the term social media activism. What are your opinions on that?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, Jada. I think it's definitely something that happens, this kind of performative activism where I want my followers to see that I shared this post on how to support the Asian American community right now, and then I don't do anything else. So I think that there is still value to sharing that information, but like I said, I think there does need to be some sort of outlet, right? It needs to come off of the screen in some way. And for some people, there are different levels of what people are able to do as far as activism, right? Not everyone is able to donate financially. Maybe some people are really only able to share. Maybe that's all they have the energy for. I mean, everyone's kind of living through a really hard time right now and a lot of levels, but I think it is really important to not just stop at sharing, right? And I think that a big part of that is local engagement. I think that it can be really exhausting sometimes. There's this idea of burnout. It can be really exhausting to always be focused on everything in the world that's going wrong. And it's important to bring awareness and attention to those. But I think sometimes people kind of can shut down, right? There's sense that there's so much I'm never going to catch up. I'm never going to learn all that I've missed. So maybe I'll just share this and go away. Maybe I won't even share it. There's just one thing after another. So I think that local engagement is really important and kind of building these communities where people can support one another on a smaller scale. And the other side of this is with this kind of social media activism that you're talking about is there's a lot of defensiveness. I mean, especially from what I've seen from white people online saying, oh, I'm not racist. I read that sentence a lot this summer and in the past week or so. But I think there's this pushback too sometimes to learning new things and to learning new perspectives and to learning that people have different challenges to you, and especially around identity-based systems of oppression like that, some people, especially white people, finding out that not only does racism exist, but if you're not actively combating it, you're a part of it, especially as a white person. I think there's this level of defensiveness. And I think that's something that in a lot of ways is pretty specific to the United States. I think racism and I think human rights violations work really differently depending on where you are. But I think there is this experience people have of a feeling overwhelmed, of like learning about this stuff and then not knowing what to do next. And so I really do think that kind of having these outlets off the screen, so sharing this information and then doing something about it, maybe in local communities and local groups, which it sounds like you're super involved in, Jada, with your local community. You're in Chapel Hill. Yeah, and so, yeah, I think just kind of on that scale, trying to shift things back a little bit from this global scale in some ways can just be more manageable for people. So I think focusing on both those levels, like Sarah was talking about, these broad international policy levels, all of these sorts of things, and the local level, I think kind of giving equal attention to both is in some ways, is how people can, not shut out, right? Not shut down with all this information.
Thank you. And so, if there isn't a question, I'll ask a question to everyone. Sarah mentioned, oh, okay, we have a question from participants. Let's give the priority to them. Leonida, can you hear us?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear.
Yes.
Yes, my name is Leonida from Kenya. I have a question on sustaining activism amongst young people. what are the best strategy to sustain momentum, especially amongst young people, when they're getting into the activism journey? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Leonida. So her question was how to maintain the momentum for activism among youth. So what would your recommendations be on this?
I can start off for this one. I think this is again sort of like the same thing over and over, but like really social media has a huge impact, especially I believe like the current rise of different social media platforms such as like TikTok or I don't know, like Instagram. It really plays such a huge role because people are constantly updating each other about what is going on in the world. And I think that's so important. So I would say definitely like social media and just like people trying to inform each other on social media is huge. And other than that, I believe, like I mentioned earlier, young people who are motivated to take part in such activism activities should actively promote this to others because we really don't want people to think that it's hard to work towards such topics. I think one really important thing to do is you like scaring off people. That's just like a very dangerous thing. If you like just like being, oh, you're not good enough for like working towards this issue, that's just gonna like scare off people, and it's really gonna like damage what you're damage the whole point of activism rather than like supporting it. It's really like if you're like if you, for example, like I'm vegetarian, but I don't go around telling my friends to never ever eat meat. I really try to like I try to like praise them if they try to lower the amount of meat they eat, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's really good. So like encouragement and just like telling that, like motivating them for any small effort they put into it is very important.
Thank you. Okay. Right now, we don't have any other questions from the attendees. And if our speakers don't have any questions for themselves, we can, I think, close the session. So I really appreciate all your time and efforts for participating in this event, your valuable ideas, your vision, your experiences. Thank you very much for participating. Hope to see you soon in the upcoming events in the future.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.